The Elven Council chamber was cold and silent when Lyran Silverveil walked inside with chains on her wrists and anger in her heart. But she kept her face empty of emotion because showing feelings would only make things worse for her now, and she had learned long ago that pride was a luxury warriors could not afford when standing before those who held their fate in ancient hands high. Magister Valithus sat on his crystal throne and looked down at her with eyes that had seen 1,000 years pass like water through fingers, and he spoke in a voice that carried no warmth or mercy when he told her that she was found guilty of the crime of disobedience and the crime of questioning orders and the crime of putting her own judgment above the wisdom of those who had ruled their people since before her grandmother was born. Lyran wanted to scream at him and tell him that his orders would have killed innocent people in the border villages, and that sometimes the old wisdom was just old fear dressed up in fancy words, but she said nothing because words would not change what was coming, and she had always known that her choices would lead to this moment sooner or later. Beside stood Emberclaw, and even though the dragon was forced to stay in his smaller form to fit inside the chamber, everyone could feel the heat radiating from his copper scales and see the smoke curling from his nostrils as he fought to control his rage because dragons did not like to see their bonded partners treated with disrespect, and Emberclaw had been with Lyran for 3 centuries of battles and blood and brotherhood that went deeper than family. The High Magister announced the punishment, and Lyran felt her stomach turn cold because exile was bad, but this was worse than simple exile because they were sending her to the human world, and everyone knew that the human world was classified as Class-15, which meant it was a death world, where everything existed to kill everything else, and even the air and water could be dangerous if you were not careful. Valithos explained that the humans themselves were the worst part of that world because they were savage creatures who fought each other constantly and who had no magic or culture or anything that made a civilization worth the name, and they would probably kill her within days if the world itself did not do it first, and the council believed this was a fitting end for someone who had forgotten her place. The portal opened behind her, and it looked like a wound cut into reality itself, and through it she could see green trees and blue sky, and everything looked deceptively peaceful. But Lyran knew that Deathworlds were good at hiding their dangers until it demmed up was too late to run, and she also knew that arguing or begging would accomplish nothing because the decision was made and the council had already moved on to other matters in their minds. She walked through the portal with her head high, and Emberclaw followed without hesitation because where she went, he would always follow, and that's the nature of the bond between elf and dragon, and nothing could break it except death itself, and maybe not even then if the old stories were true about souls that stayed connected across the Veltha world on the other side. Hit her senses like a physical blow, and everything was too much and too loud and too chaotic compared to the ordered perfection of the elven realms where magic kept things neat and controlled and predictable. But here the magic was wild and raw and woven into every living thing in ways that made her head spin. Emberclaw expanded to his full size the moment they were clear of the portal, and his wings spread wide enough to cast shadows over several trees, and he roared his anger at the sky because dragons needed to announce themselves and claim territory and warn anything nearby that a new predator had arrived in their midslaron. Them and knew there would be no going back because exile was permanent, and the council would never forgive or forget, and she was truly alone. Now, except for Emberclaw, who was circling above the forest and scanning for threats with eyes that could spot a rabbit from a mile away. The forest around them was dense and green and full of sounds that she did not recognize and smells that were both familiar and strange at the same time. Because plants were plants everywhere, but these ones had evolved in different ways and adapted to different pressures, and she could feel the aggressive life force radiating from every leaf and root. Within an hour of arriving, she watched a small, furry creature get snatched by a larger furry creature that dropped from a tree branch like a brown shadow, and the kill was efficient and brutal and over in seconds, and she realized that this was normal here, and that everything in this forest was either predator or prey, and sometimes both, depending on what else was nearby. Emberclaw landed beside her and spoke directly into her mind the way bonded dragons always did, and he told her that he could sense massive creatures moving through the southern SWAT regions and flying creatures that ruled the skies in flocks. and water creatures that lurked in the rivers and lakes, and everything was hungry and everything was dangerous. She told him they needed to find the humans, because if they were going to survive here, they would need allies who understood this world and its rules. And even though she had been taught that humans were primitive and weak, she had also been taught that the Elven Council was always wise, and recent events had proven that teaching wrong. They moved through the forest carefully, and Liren used her magic to hide their presence from mundane senses, but she kept the spells light because she did not know what else might be watching. With other types of sight, and drawing too much attention could be fatal in a place like this. Evening, they reached the edge of the forest and saw human structures in the distance, and the buildings were made of wood and stone and metal in combinations that looked strange to her eyes, but also sturdy and practical in ways that elven architecture, with its focus on beauty, sometimes was not. She could see humans moving between the buildings, and they wore simple clothes and carried objects she did not recognize, and they seemed completely at ease in their deadly world, as if they had forgotten or never known that they lived surrounded by things that could kill them. Emberclaw wanted to fly down and announce their presence in the traditional dragon way by landing in the center of the settlement, roaring a challenge, but Liren stopped him because humans probably would not understand dragon customs and might react with violence born of fear instead. She cast a glamour over Emberclaw that made him appear as a very large dog to human eyes, and she adjusted her own appearance too, hide her pointed ears and make herself look more human, and together they walked down from the forest toward the town as the sun began to set. Settlement was called Millbrook according to a sign at the edge, and it was small by elven standards, but it had a feeling of permanence and community that surprised her, because she had expected humans to live in temporary camps and move around constantly. Following food, she entered a building that had warm light glowing through its windows and a sign that said it was a place where humans ate food together. And inside, she found a long counter with stools and tables with chairs, and the smell of cooking meat and bread that made her stomach remind her she had not eaten since morning. A human woman stood behind the counter, and she had gray hair and sharp eyes, and moved with the easy confidence of someone who had seen much and survived it all. And when she looked at Liren, there was a moment of assessment that reminded Liren of how veteran warriors sized up potential threats. The woman introduced herself as Kate Morrison and asked if Liren was new to town, and Liren said yes, because it was the truth. And Kate poured a cup of something hot and dark and pushed it across the counter without being asked, and told her to sit and rest because she looked like she had traveled far. Lynn sat and tried the drink, and it was bitter but also energizing, and she realized it had some kind of stimulant in it that humans use casually, and she wondered what else these people consumed without thinking that would be considered dangerous in other places. Kate asked direct questions about where Liren came from and what brought her here, and Liren realized she could not maintain her cover story when she did not know enough about human customs and geography. So she made a decision that could either save her or doom her. She told Kate the truth, but she did it quietly so other humans in the building would not hear. And she explained about the elven realms and the exile, and the shadow legions that were coming through dimensional rifts to invade this world and consume everything living. Here Kate listened without interrupting, and her face showed nothing, but her body language shifted in small ways that Liren had learned to read in warriors. And when the story was finished, Kate was silent for a long moment before she asked if Liren could prove any of it. Liren dropped the glamour on Emberclaw, and suddenly the large dog became a massive dragon curled in the corner of the diner, and his copper scales reflected the lights, and his eyes glowed with inner fire. And Kate drew in a sharp breath, but did not scream or run, and that told Liren more about human courage than any story could have. Kate made a decision quickly and told Liren to follow her, and she led them down to a basement beneath the diner, where she made several calls on a device that let humans talk across distances. And within an hour, other humans began arriving. They came one by one, and Kate introduced them as people she trusted. And there was Linda Hayes, who ran the town, and Amy Brooks, who kept the peace, and Claire Winters, who, "Your honor intact. Pull your ships back, and we will occupy this world peacefully. Your civilians will not be harmed if they cooperate with hegemony authorities. There is no need for blood to be spilled today." Catherine kept her face completely neutral. Fleet Master, I have 800,000 civilians on that planet who are still in the process of evacuation. I request a temporary ceasefire to allow them to leave safely. Once they are gone, we can discuss the future of the colony. Vorith's patterns shifted to colors that indicated contempt. Your civilians chose to build their homes on hegemony territory. Their situation is not my concern. You have 1/10 of a rotation to withdraw your warships. If you do not leave, we will engage and destroy you. Catherine took a slow breath. Fleet Master, I am going to explain something to you very clearly. In human military tradition, we do not accept losses among civilians. We do not leave our people behind. We do not surrender them to hostile forces. And we absolutely do not retreat while innocent people remain in danger. Then you will die protecting them, Voroth said dismissively. How noble. How foolish. How human. Perhaps we will die, Catherine agreed. But so will you. And my species has spent thousands of years learning exactly how to make our deaths count for something. Can you say the same? She cut the transmission before Vorath could respond and turned to her bridge crew. Every face was tense but determined. These were soldiers who knew what was coming and had made peace with it. Execute tactical plan, Echo 7, Catherine commanded. All ships, weapons free. Target their communication relays first. And may God have mercy on their souls, because we certainly will not. The battle that followed would be studied in military schools across the galaxy for generations to come. The Vorthani expected the humans to follow the established rules of engagement. They expected the two fleets to approach each other in orderly formation, exchange ceremonial challenges, and then begin combat at prescribed distances. This was how civilized species had fought for millennia. Instead, Catherine split her 12 ships into 4 separate groups and attacked from 4 different directions at once. While the Vorsani were still trying to understand what was happening, human weapons were already tearing into their communication satellites and relay stations. Within the first 3 minutes, the Vorthani fleet lost the ability to coordinate their movements. The Vorthani fighters were trained for one-on-one combat, each pilot seeking a worthy opponent to duel in the ancient traditions. Human pilots flew in tight packs of 3 and 4, watching each other's backs and attacking together. A Vorthani fighter would engage one human ship only to be destroyed by 2 others swooping in from behind. In the first 10 minutes of the battle, 6 Vorthani warships were either destroyed or disabled. Their beautiful crystal hulls cracked and shattered under the impact of human missiles and energy weapons. Escape pods launched in all directions as crews abandoned their dying vessels. Fleet Master Voreth, watching his perfect formation fall apart, ordered a tactical withdrawal. His remaining ships began to pull back, trying to regroup and form a new battle line. Catherine did not let him. All ships pursuit formation, she commanded. Do not let them reorganize. Stay on them. Her executive officer, a woman named Grace Kim, looked concerned. Admiral, standard doctrine suggests we should consolidate our position and assess damage before continuing the engagement. Catherine replied without taking her eyes off the display. Assumes an enemy who will show mercy to our civilians if they win. The Vorthani will not. They will occupy that planet and do whatever they want to our people. We end this here and now. Pursuit lasted 3 hours. Human ships chased the retreating Vorthani across the system, hitting them again and again, never allowing them to rest or regroup. One by one, the Vorthani warships were disabled or destroyed. Their crews surrendered or died. When it was finally over, 14 of the 17 Vorsani warships had been eliminated. The remaining 3, including Voreth's badly damaged flagship, managed to escape into hyperspace and flee toward hegemony territory. They left behind a field of debris and rescue beacons. Catherine surveyed the aftermath. Her own fleet had paid a heavy price. 2 ships destroyed completely. 3 more damaged so badly they would need months of repair. Hundreds of crew members dead or wounded, but the colony was safe. Admiral, her communications officer, reported, "We are receiving transmissions from the Galactic Council. They are demanding an immediate explanation for what they are calling an unprovoked attack on hegemony forces." Catherine almost laughed at the absurdity. Unprovoked. 17 warships surrounding a civilian colony is not a provocation? Threatening 800,000 people is not aggression? What should I tell them, Admiral? Catherine thought for a moment. Tell them that we were defending our territory from an invading force. Tell them that we offered a peaceful solution and were rejected. And tell them that if the hegemony wants a war, they have found one. She turned back to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere in that direction, the survivors of the Vorthani fleet were running home to report what had happened. They would tell their leaders that the humans had fought without honor, without rules. Without mercy, they would be right. And that was exactly the point. Grace. Catherine said quietly to her executive officer, "Begin search and rescue operations for any Vorthani survivors. Treat them well. They were soldiers doing their duty, same as us." "Yes, Admiral." "And the civilians on the planet?" "Resume evacuation immediately. This battle is over, but the war is just beginning. I want our people out of harm's way before the hegemony sends a bigger fleet." Catherine walked to the window and pressed her hand against the cold glass. Beyond it, the stars burned with ancient light, indifferent to the small dramas of the species that lived among them. The humans had won their first battle, but she knew that the Vorthani would not accept this defeat. They would return with more ships, more weapons, more anger. And when they did, humanity would need to be ready, because this was no longer about one colony or one planet. This was about survival. This was about proving to the galaxy that humanity would not be pushed around, would not be threatened, would not be treated as less than any other species. This was about showing the universe what humans were really capable of when someone hurt their family. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was the most crowded meeting in living memory. Every species with a seat had sent their most senior diplomats. The observation galleries high above the chamber floor were packed with journalists, historians, and curious citizens from across known space. Everyone wanted to witness what was about to happen. Ambassador Daniel Price walked toward the human podium with slowest steps. His face was calm, but his eyes were hard. Behind him came Admiral Catherine Walsh and a group of military and civilian leaders from Earth. They all wore the same simple gray uniforms, standing out like shadows among the colorful robes of the other delegations. "Hi, Arbiter." Zelkrath was already speaking when Daniel reached his place. The Vorthani leader's crystal body blazed with furious red and white patterns as he addressed the assembly. "This unprovoked massacre of peaceful Vorthani vessels demands immediate and severe punishment," Zelkrath declared. His voice echoed through the chamber. "The humans have violated every principle of civilized warfare. They attacked without warning. They showed no mercy. They hunted our ships like animals. This is barbarism of the worst kind and cannot be allowed to stand." Daniel activated his podium's speaking system and interrupted. "Peaceful vessels? High Arbiter?" "Fleet Master Voroth gave us an ultimatum threatening 800,000 civilians with military occupation. When we requested time to evacuate those civilians, he refused. His ships fired the first weapons. We simply fired better ones." Zelkrath's pattern shifted rapidly with barely controlled rage. "Your forces attacked ships that were merely establishing a defensive position around disputed territory. The rules of engagement clearly state that combat cannot begin until both sides have formally agreed to battle. You violated sacred traditions that have governed warfare for 10,000 years. The rules of engagement," Daniel replied steadily, "were written by species who view war as a game, a ritual, a polite way of settling arguments without too much actual killing." He paused and looked around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces watching him. "Humanity has a very different understanding of what war means." The chamber fell silent. Even Zelkrath stopped speaking to listen. "When humans fight," Daniel continued, "we fight to win. Not to score points. Not to gain honor. Not to prove that we are better than our enemies. We fight to destroy those enemies so completely that they can never threaten us again. This is not cruelty or savagery. This is survival. For thousands of years, we had no one to fight except ourselves. We became extremely good at it, Counselor Myra Thex of the Andrade Collective stood and clicked her mandibles in the pattern that meant she wished to speak. Ambassador Price, the Council recognizes humanity's right to defend itself. However, the Vorthani hegemony has formally requested arbitration of this dispute. Surely we can find a way to resolve the situation through peaceful means. We tried peaceful means, Daniel answered. We asked this council to support our legal CL. Aim to the colony. You gave the hegemony permission to threaten our civilians instead. Peaceful means have failed. Now the hegemony must face the consequences of their actions. Zelkrath's form pulsed with intense light. You dare to lecture us about consequences? The hegemony commands the largest fleet in the entire galaxy. We have conquered 100 worlds. We have crushed species far more powerful than yours. We will destroy you so completely that the galaxy will forget humans ever existed. Daniel did not flinch. Instead, he stepped forward to the very edge of his podium and raised his voice so that every being in the chamber could hear him clearly. 3 days ago, the Vorthani hegemony committed an act of war against humanity. They attacked our citizens. They attempted to occupy our territory. In response, the United Earth government has authorized me to make the following declaration. He paused. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Not a single being moved or spoke. As of this moment, humanity is in a state of total war with the Vorthani hegemony. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the assembly. Several delegates began talking urgently among themselves. The phrase total war was not commonly used in galactic diplomacy. Most species did not even have an equivalent concept in their languages. Daniel continued speaking over the noise. Total war means that every Vorthani military base is now a target for human forces. Every Vorthani warship is a target. Every weapons factory, every shipyard, every military supply depot, we will not negotiate. We will not accept arbitration. We will not stop until the hegemony either surrenders completely or no longer exists as a functioning government. The chamber erupted into chaos. Zelkrath was screaming something that the translators could barely keep up with. Other delegates were shouting questions and demands. Several species began hurrying toward the exits. Wanting no part of what was about to happen, Admiral Walsh stepped forward to stand beside Daniel. Her voice cut through the noise with military precision. Hi, Arbiter Zelkrath. I have a message for you from United Earth Fleet Command. The 3 ships that escaped from the battle at Kepler 44b are being tracked. Your homeworld's orbital defenses have been mapped and analyzed. Your major supply routes have been identified and targeted. And 47 human warships left Earth 6 hours ago. They will arrive at your primary shipyard in 12 days. The chaos in the chamber stopped instantly as the meaning of her words became clear. You would attack our homeworld, Zelkrath whispered. His crystal body had gone almost dark with shock. We would destroy your ability to make war, Catherine replied calmly. That is what total war means. We do not fight individual battles and then go home. We do not stop when you surrender one fleet. We destroy everything that allows you to threaten us, and we keep destroying it until you can never threaten anyone again. Zelkrath seemed unable to speak. His form flickered through dozens of color patterns as he tried to process what he was hearing. Counselor Thex rose again, her wings trembling slightly. Humanity, we urge you to reconsider this course of action. The consequences of such a conflict could destabilize the entire galactic region. Millions of lives on both sides could be lost. Trade routes will be disrupted. Other species will be drawn into the fighting. Is this really what you want? Daniel turned to face her directly. What we want, Counselor, is to live in peace with our neighbors. What we want is for our children to grow up without fear. What we want is to be treated as equals in this galactic community, not as primitives who can be bullied and threatened.
Always.
His voice hardened. The hegemony chose to threaten 800,000 human civilians. They chose to blockade our colony. They chose to reject our offers of negotiation. Now they must live with the consequences of those choices. He looked back at Zelkrath. You have 12 days before our fleet arrives at your shipyard, High Arbiter. I suggest you use that time to evacuate any civilians from the area. because when we arrive, we will not be offering terms of surrender. We will be there to destroy your ability to wage war, and we will not stop until that mission is complete." The human delegation turned as one and began walking toward the chamber exit. "You cannot do this." Zelkroth called after them, his voice cracking with desperation. "The galaxy will not allow it. The other species will unite against you." Daniel stopped at the doorway and looked back. "Perhaps they will. But I think they will remember something important first. We did not start this war. You did. We offered peace. You refused. And now the entire galaxy is going to learn what happens when you make humanity fight for survival." He walked through the doors without another word. Behind him, the Galactic Council descended into panic. Delegates rushed to communicate with their home governments. Military advisors began calculating scenarios and probabilities. Diplomats argued about treaties and alliances and ancient agreements. But everyone in that chamber understood one thing with perfect clarity: the galaxy had just changed forever. The humans were no longer the quiet newcomers keeping their heads down and trying to fit in. The humans had shown their teeth, and those teeth were sharper than anyone had ever imagined. The war lasted 14 months. In that time, the galaxy learned what human military planners had known for centuries. That total war was not just a more intense version of regular warfare. It was an entirely different way of thinking about conflict. The Vorthani had expected the humans to attack military targets and fight great battles for control of important planets. This was how all previous galactic wars had been conducted. Two fleets would meet, fight until one side lost too many ships to continue, and then negotiate a settlement. Clean, orderly, civilized. Instead, human forces attacked infrastructure. Power plants that provided energy to Vorthani worlds went dark. Communication satellites were destroyed, cutting off contact between different parts of the hegemony. Food distribution ships were captured or disabled. The massive trade routes that kept the Vorthani economy running were disrupted at every opportunity. Captain Marcus Webb commanded one of the hunter-killer groups assigned to disrupting enemy supply lines. His 3 small frigates operated far from any support, moving quickly from target to target. In 2 months, they had destroyed 17 cargo convoys, carrying everything from weapons to medical supplies. "Captain," his sensor operator reported, "we have a Vorsani battlecruiser approaching our position. It looks like they finally started assigning military escorts to their supply convoys."
Studies.
Marcus studied the tactical display carefully. His frigates were fast and hard to hit, but a battlecruiser had far more firepower. A direct fight would not end well for his small squadron. "What is the battlecruiser protecting?" he asked. 12 cargo vessels, sir. Ship registry indicates they are carrying agricultural equipment and medical supplies to the Vorthani colony on Draketh 4. Marcus frowned. Agricultural and medical. Not weapons or military equipment? No, sir. The colony has been experiencing severe food shortages ever since we destroyed their main farming facility last month. These supplies are for civilians. The bridge fell quiet. Every crew member was thinking the same thing, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Marcus stared at the display for a long moment. His orders were clear: disrupt enemy supply lines by any means necessary. Starving the hegemony of resources was a key part of the overall strategy. But there was a difference between attacking military targets and letting innocent people go hungry. "We let them pass," Marcus said finally. "Signal the convoy that they have safe passage through this sector." His executive officer, a young woman named Sandra Cole, looked surprised. "Sir, our orders." "Our orders are to destroy the hegemony's ability to make war," Marcus interrupted. "Food for starving civilians does not help them make war. It helps them survive. There is a difference, and I will not forget that difference, no matter what our orders say." The communication was sent. A few minutes later, a response arrived from the Vorthani battlecruiser. "Human vessels, this is Hegemony Battlecruiser Resplendent Victory. I am Shipmaster Zalthari. Your choice to allow our convoy safe passage is noted with gratitude. May I know the name of your commander?" Marcus opened a channel to respond. Shipmaster, I am Captain Marcus Webb of the United Earth Navy. Captain Webb, in recognition of your honorable action, I offer the following arrangement. My vessel will not engage yours if you withdraw from this sector immediately. We do not need to be enemies today. There has been enough death already. Marcus thought about it. His frigates could escape easily enough if they needed to. But accepting the offer meant abandoning his patrol route for several days, potentially allowing other military convoys to slip through. Still, there was something in Zelthari's voice that suggested he was tired of killing too. I accept your terms, shipmaster. Safe travels to your convoy. I hope the supplies reach the people who need them. As do I, Captain. Perhaps when this war finally ends, our species will find a better path forward. The frigates powered away from the convoy and disappeared into the darkness between stars. Not every encounter ended so peacefully on Vorthani Prime itself. The hegemony had built up their orbital defenses with everything they could gather. Massive weapons platforms surrounded the planet in layers. Thousands of fighter craft waited in hidden bases on the moons. The Vorthane knew that a human attack was coming, and they were determined to make it cost as much as possible. Admiral Walsh's task force arrived with 63 warships. The assault took 3 weeks of brutal fighting. Lieutenant Commander Amy Chen flew a strike fighter in the attack on the primary defense platform. It was a massive structure, larger than many cities, bristling with weapons and protected by layers of shielding. Her squadron had already lost 6 pilots trying to find a weakness in its defenses. Blue Squadron, this is Blue Leader, Amy transmitted to her remaining pilots. Intelligence believes the eastern thermal vents are a weak point in the platform's armor. That is our target. Form up on me and follow my approach vector. Copy, Blue Leader. We are taking heavy fire from Sector 7. I see it. Stay tight and do not break formation. We get one chance at this. Make it count. Amy pushed her fighter into a steep dive, leading her squadron toward the platform's underbelly. All around them, space was filled with missiles and energy beams. Warning alarms screamed in her cockpit. Her hands were steady on the controls despite the chaos. She watched her targeting computer, waiting for the perfect moment. 3 seconds. 2, 1. Firing now. Her missiles streaked away toward the thermal vents. Behind her, the other pilots in her squadron added their own weapons to the barrage. The platform's shields flickered, failed for just a moment, and the missiles found their target. The eastern section of the platform erupted in a chain reaction of explosions. Fire spread from compartment to compartment as systems overloaded and ammunition cooked off. Good hit, good hit. All squadrons, clear the blast zone immediately. Amy pulled her damaged fighter away as the entire massive structure began to break apart. Secondary explosions tore through its core. Pieces the size of buildings tumbled away into space. And then the platform's main reactor lost containment, and the whole thing disappeared in a flash of blinding light. Blue Squadron returned to carrier. Well done, everyone. As Amy guided her fighter back toward the Endeavor, she found herself thinking about how many Vorsani had been aboard that platform. Hundreds? Thousands? They had been soldiers doing their jobs, same as her. They probably had families waiting for them to come home. War was never clean. She was learning. Even when it was necessary, even when you were fighting for the right reasons, people still died. And those deaths still mattered. The destruction of the orbital defenses broke the hegemony's will to resist. Their fleet was shattered. Their economy was in ruins. Their people had experienced genuine hardship for the first time in thousands of years. 3 days after the last defense platform fell, High Arbiter Zelkroth requested terms of surrender. Admiral Walsh met with him via video transmission. The Vorthane leader's crystal body was dim and flickering, all the arrogance gone from his colors. We cannot continue, Zelkroth admitted. Our people are suffering. Our worlds are cut off from each other. We have nothing left to fight with. I ask only that you show mercy to our civilians. Catherine studied him for a long moment. Mercy is exactly what we intend to show, High Arbiter. We did not fight this war to destroy your people. We fought it to stop you from threatening ours. Once the formal surrender is signed, human forces will withdraw from Vorthane territory completely. We will provide humanitarian aid to any worlds that need it. And we will work with your government to establish a lasting peace between our species. Zelkrath's patterns shifted to something that might have been surprise. You would help us. After everything we have done? After everything both of us have done, Catherine corrected him gently. War is terrible, High Arbiter. We know this better than most. Now it is time to stop fighting and start healing. That is what humans do when the fighting is over. We rebuild. We forgive. We try to be better. Formal surrender was scheduled for the following week, to be held in the same Galactic Council chamber where the war had begun. For the first time in 14 months, the guns finally fell silent. The surrender ceremony took place in the same Galactic Council chamber where Ambassador Daniel Price had declared total war 14 months earlier. The great circular room looked different now. Many seats were empty, as several species had chosen to stay away from both sides of the conflict. The observation galleries that had once been packed with curious spectators now held mostly journalists recording the historic moment. High Arbiter, Elkreth stood before the human delegation. His crystal body was dim and subdued, pulsing with soft gray patterns that spoke of exhaustion and defeat. The war had cost the hegemony everything they had built over thousands of years. Their mighty fleet was scattered wreckage. Their economy would take generations to recover. Their reputation as the most powerful force in the galaxy had been shattered beyond repair. On behalf of the Vorthani hegemony, Zelkrath said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper, I accept the terms of unconditional surrender presented by the United Earth government. We acknowledge human sovereignty over Kepler 44b and all territories previously claimed by humanity. We agree to pay reparations for damages caused during the initial attack on the colony. And we... He paused, his patterns flickering with what might have been shame. We apologize for underestimating your species. We apologize for the arrogance that led us to believe we could threaten you without consequences. We are sorry for all the suffering our actions have caused. Ambassador Daniel Price nodded gravely. He looked older than he had at the start of the war, with more gray in his hair and deeper lines around his eyes. But his voice was steady and calm. The United Earth government accepts your surrender and your apology. It is our sincere hope that this conflict can mark the beginning of a new relationship between our peoples. Not a relationship based on fear or resentment, but one built on mutual respect and understanding. Admiral Catherine Walsh stepped forward to stand beside Daniel. She wore the same simple uniform she always wore. With no medals or decorations despite the victory she had achieved, High Arbiter, she said, I want you to know that human forces will withdraw from Vorthani space immediately. We have no interest in occupying your worlds or controlling your government. Our only goal was to protect our people and demonstrate that humanity will not be bullied or threatened. Now that goal has been achieved, there is no reason for us to remain. Zelkrath's patterns shifted slowly as he processed her words. Admiral, I have studied your tactics throughout this war. Your forces showed unexpected restraint in many situations. You allowed humanitarian convoys to pass unharmed. You minimized civilian casualties whenever possible. You accepted surrenders when your enemies perhaps deserved no mercy. This was not what we expected from a species practicing total war. Catherine allowed herself a slight smile. Total war does not mean total destruction, High Arbiter. It means total commitment to achieving victory. Once that victory was certain, there was no need for additional bloodshed. We are not monsters. We are simply survivors who refuse to lose. The signing of the formal surrender documents took several hours. Every clause had to be reviewed and approved. Translations had to be verified. Representatives from neutral species served as witnesses to ensure everything was done properly. When it was finally complete, delegates from dozens of species approached the human contingent with varying expressions on their alien faces. Some looked afraid. Others seemed curious. A few actually appeared impressed. Counselor Myra Vex of the Andrade Collective was among the first to speak with Daniel. Her wings rustled softly as she bowed her head in a gesture of respect. Ambassador Price, The Andrade Collective wishes to formally recognize humanity's new status as a major power within galactic affairs. We hope to establish closer diplomatic and trade relations with your species. We would welcome that, Counselor, Daniel replied warmly. Dex tilted her head in the way that indicated she had a question. May I ask you something? Throughout this conflict, many of us expected humanity to become consumed by war. Other species who taste victory often become conquerors themselves. They grow hungry for more power and more territory. Yet you stopped fighting the moment the threat was ended. Why? Daniel thought about the question carefully before answering. Because war is terrible, Counselor. Humans know this better than anyone. We have been killing each other since before we learned to write. Eve. Regeneration hopes that the current war will be the last, that our children will find peaceful solutions to their problems. He glanced across the chamber to where the Vorthani delegation was preparing to leave. We fought this war because we had no other choice. We ended it the moment we could. That is not nobility or wisdom. That is simply survival. A species that loves war eventually destroys itself. A wise perspective, Thex acknowledged. I hope the rest of the galaxy will learn from it. As the ceremony concluded and the delegations began to leave, Admiral Walsh found herself standing near one of the great windows that looked out into space. Captain Marcus Webb, recently promoted to Commodore for his actions during the supply line campaign, joined her there. You were thinking about Shipmaster Zelthari, Catherine said. It was not a question. Marcus nodded slowly. I heard that he survived the war. His battle cruiser was one of the few vessels that surrendered at Vorthani Prime. I know. I accepted his surrender personally. Catherine gazed out at the distant stars. He asked about you. He wanted to know if you had survived the fighting. Oh. What did you tell him? That you had, and that you would probably want to share a drink with him someday. When the wounds have healed enough to make that possible. Out. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Maybe I will. He seemed like a decent being, just following orders from leaders who made terrible decisions. Most enemies are like that, Catherine said softly. Good people caught up in bad situations, fighting for causes they believe in. That is why war is so tragic. Both sides are usually convinced they are right. They stood in silence, watching the stars. Do you think this is really over? Marcus asked finally. Catherine shook her head. This particular war is over. But we have changed things, Commodore. The galaxy knows what humanity is capable of now. Some species will fear us and keep their distance. Others will want to test us and see if we are as dangerous as we prove to be. We will need to remain ready for whatever comes next. And in the meantime, we go home. We repair our ships and rebuild what was damaged. We mourn our dead and comfort their families. And we hope, truly hope, that the next generation finds better solutions than we did. She turned away from the window. Come on, we have a long journey ahead of us. As they walked out of the chamber, Marcus took one last look at the stars. Somewhere out there, 800,000 humans were living their lives on Kepler for 4 to be. Children were playing in the streets. Farmers were tending their crops. Families were sitting down to dinner together. They would probably never know how close they had come to losing everything. They would never fully understand the price that had been paid to keep them safe. And perhaps that was for the best. That was what soldiers fought for, after all. Not for glory or recognition, not for medals or fame. They fought so that ordinary people could live ordinary lives without fear. The age of galactic innocence was over. The old powers had learned that humanity was not to be dismissed or bullied. The universe had discovered that the young species from the small blue world carried fire in their hearts and iron in their souls. But more importantly, humanity had proven something to itself. They had faced the greatest military power in the galaxy and refused to surrender. They had protected their people against impossible odds. And when the fighting was done, they had chosen mercy over vengeance. Perhaps that was the most human thing of all. The ability to be terrible when necessary and gentle when possible. The strength to destroy enemies and the wisdom to make them into friends. As the last human ships prepared to leave Nexus Prime and begin the long journey home, a new chapter was beginning. not just for humanity, but for the entire galaxy. The universe would never be quite the same, and humanity was just getting started.